Now, speaking of structuring the application, in my app component HTML file in this template, I got my message. Right now, that's all the content my application has, but this will change in the next videos. And I will create multiple features and things. And also the message part can be split up into multiple components if you look at it like this. I at least see a message component here. This article, this would be a great component. So let's go to the messages folder and create a new component there. Here, I want to create a message component, and I will store it in a message.component.ts file. Now, why do I name this file like this? Because in Angular 2, it's a good convention to have the name of what's inside there as a first thing in the name, in the file name. And then the second part in the file name, component in this case here, should describe what's in the file. So the feature is a message, but the thing in this file is a component. So with that, I save this, and now I will go to my app component and copy all that code here, including the input, which I'll delete in a second anyways, into my message component. Though not in the message component TS file, but instead let's create a new HTML file, message component HTML. So we get the TypeScript file for the business logic, so to say, and the HTML file for the template. I'll get rid of the input, and now I have my message in there. Now, of course, my message component TS file certainly needs to grow a little bit. That's not all I want to have here. Instead, here I want to export a class, which I'll name message component, like that. And then let's make this a component. And you learned how to make it a component. We add the add component decorator, like this. Make sure to import it from @AngularCore. Here we need to pass a JavaScript object configuring this component. I want to have a selector, and now here this is important. How do you choose a good selector name? The selector works like a CSS selector, so you could use hashtag something to select any element which has an ID of something, like you select by CSS. But typically you use the element style, so to select the element like this, or simply here, looking like that. Something, of course, isn't a built-in element, so I created my own one with that. However, you want to make sure that you have a unique selector here. You don't accidentally want to override something. So if I were to choose H1, well, I would override all H1 elements. It's certainly not what I want. Or if I would choose something else, which a third-party package I might also use, that would also be bad. So prefix it with something which makes it unique. That could be app or my. Now here I will use app and then message. And this allows me to use app message to insert this component into my code. Of course, I also need to point to my template URL, and here write / to make this a relative path, and then point to message component HTML. With this set up, I got my basic component, and now the thing left is to hook it up in my app component, which, remember, is my root component. I will add all other components to my app component, not to the index.hps file. Angular 2 won't find them there because it only knows how to start this app component. Remember, we're telling it here in the bootstrap array. So instead, we need to add it here in the app component now. So here I simply enter app message, which is the selector I just set up, to render this new component in this root component, which will hold my entire application. Though there's one thing missing. If I do it like this, it would not work, because Angular 2 would still not be aware of the message component. By default, it doesn't scan all your files for selectors, which is great because that would really be a performance hit. Instead, we have to make it aware of our new component. And we just do so in the app module file. Remember that I told you that here we would register everything which makes up our application? The message component is one of these things which make up our application. So we have to add it here in the declarations array, which is the place where you add all new components or directives or pipes you want to use. Here I will add the message component, and you also need to add the import to the messages/message.component file, without a file extension. That's important. You always create these imports without a file extension. With this in place, let's save this, and this should trigger the re-rendering of the application. And then if we go over to the application and reload it, you now see the message again, but the input field is gone, and all the content, of course. And also these buttons are back on the left. I'll work on the content soon, but let's first add the styling. The styling is missing because it's set up here in the app component. Here. I explained that it belongs to the component where we set it up. And even though message component is a child component of app component, that are a lot of components, because we set it up here in the app component template, it still is contained to the app component. It's not working this way that it would travel down the child route. No, it still only belongs to the app component. So if we want to move the styling over to the message component, I have to cut it here and insert it here. And with this, if I reload the application after re-rendering, you see now that it moved over there. So the styling is back, but of course the content is still missing. Now we could fix this by simply copying this message property over to the message component, but I don't want to do this. I'll show you a different way, and with that, the last forms of data binding in the next videos.